Okay, so we picked up our chunk of laminate, which looks really close to the rugs for some reason. I don't know how I feel about that yet. But it looks overall pretty good. It's not granite, but looks like granite. So I'm going to get a few measurements. We'll pull that temporary sink out, and after I have my measurements, we'll go out in the shop and build this countertop and then get it installed. Put the sinks back in and install the backsplash. Really quick guys, since we're out here in the shop, if you want a chance to win this $100 free mystery box, go back to my video where I built this tailgate bench, and all you have to do is comment on the video. You can put an emoji, you can comment, say anything, and it'll give you a chance to win this $100 free mystery box. As you know, our cabinets jump out in the middle. So what I'm going to do is round that outside corner, of course, to soften it so when you walk by, you don't catch your hip on it or something. And I think it looks a little nicer. So we're using a Skippy peanut butter lid, which is the radius of 3 3/4. And with laminate countertop, the rule of thumb is the minimum you want to bend a radius on the face would be 3 inches. So we're going to go a little bit bigger just to make it a little bit easier. Okay, so these radiuses, I always like to finish off with my belt sander and get them perfect, because we still need to add another layer, some build up here. This is only 3/4. We're going to make our countertop 1.5 inches. So once we add that second layer, I'll take my belt sander and make that perfect and follow right to my pencil line and belt sand both pieces so it's perfect. So for now we just have it close. I also like to taper in the backs because, of course, as you know, when they drywall the corners of the room, it builds up and creates space. So when you slide your countertop in, if you cut those backs in a little, it'll help you slide it right in, and I'll show you. We're going to take this in and test fit it. The backsplash runs all along here, so I always take a little bit more off, then you can float it around. The only place you should be nice and tight is right out at the base that you can see. But if you step back 1 inch, then you can take off a little more. That way your backsplash sits on there and covers that and you don't have to fight it. But if you keep your face pretty tight, I like to keep 1/8 inch so you have a little bit of play. And then when you caulk that, you're good to go. Alright, so it fits. I'm going to take a little bit off. We'll bring it back out and we'll finish it up. If you guys want to see the video of how I made my cabinets and trimmed out the garage, go back a couple videos. There's a whole garage remodel video. Okay, so what we did here, this is the bottom of our countertop. We doubled it all up. So now we have 1.5 inch thickness. Now I just need to go through and belt sand to make it nice and flush and continue this radius on the bottom piece I just applied. Okay, so there's 2 ways to do this. We could laminate it all, then mark out our sinks, and then cut it out through the laminate and the plywood. I'm just going to cut them out pre-hand just so a little less damage might occur. That way I don't have them finished and then try to cut it. Just this way it's cut, laminate it, then I'll just punch a hole for my router out the laminate, and it's done. So let's get our sinks marked out and we'll cut those out. Okay, so we have our sinks cut out. This is sand ply, or sanded ply. It's got a kind of a rough finish. It's made for staining or projects like this. So it's a little bit rough, but what I'm going to do is take the belt sander and go over it again, so when I put my contact cement on there, it really grabs to it. So there. It doesn't take much. I just use an 80 grit and go over it, and it creates a bunch of grooves in it where the contact cement, they really grab into. See all the grooves? That way it can really bite and you don't have to worry about it delaminating. Okay guys, we're going to rip some laminate for the face of the countertop first. But I want to show you a little trick when you rip laminate on a table saw. It's kind of tricky because what happens is the laminate wants to slide under your fence. So let's pretend this Bush light box is our laminate. So when you're ripping along here, and sometimes it goes down, it will slip under there. So it'll fight you and you'll end up messing up your piece. So what I do, quick trick is set your fence to whatever you need. Take a piece of plywood, rip it. It'll be down like that. So this gets you above your elevation. So then your laminate butts nice and tight to your fence here. You might have to find a way to clamp this down so it doesn't get bound up in there and shoot back at you. But now, as you can see, you have a nice table. But even if you don't have that table to catch it, if you're doing it with two people, this piece of plywood is so much bigger than your tabletop of your table saw that it will help tremendously also. So just a quick little tip before we get started. Okay, that went all right. Could have been better. Of course, it caught on everything it could have. Another thing is I like to cut off a factory edge, spin it around, cut off the other factory edge. Because when we use this piece, we'll be putting it on and routering it out, so we don't need a straight edge. So it's nice to have that factory straight edge on the pieces that you're using for the face. Okay, since we're doing our face first, because we want the face on, and then you want your top to overlap. So if any water goes on there, and it looks better. Otherwise, if you were to do your top and then your face, you would have that reveal on the top of your countertop, which wouldn't look very well, and it would hold water. But since we're doing the top first, or the face, I just took a 2x8, screwed it to my table, and then screwed through the top here into it, just to make it easier to work on. Otherwise, when it's laying down, it's a pain in the ass. So we're going to get these pieces cut to length and glued on. And that's a pretty tight radius. That's a pretty hard bend on that piece. So that's why you don't want to go too much more. Okay, really quick, what we're using is contact cement. You put it on one piece, let it dry, put it on the other piece, you let them both dry till it's pretty tacky. And when you stick them together, it's stuck. So that's how most laminate countertops are done. Pretty simple. And with these small edges, I like to put it on with a brush. The larger surfaces we'll do with a roller. So again, we'll brush this, let them dry for 15-20 minutes, and then it'll stick perfectly. So this is a new product I haven't worked with before. This is white. The other stuff was more of a yellow and had a lot more fumes to it. This is supposed to be low odor. But I'll tell you another little trick. When you do the edges of plywood like this, it's so porous that it soaks it up. I always like to do 2, sometimes 3 layers on the edge. On this smooth surface, you definitely only need one. I mean, if you want to play it safe, you could do two, but it doesn't soak it in like it does on the edge. And especially here, where you have this tight radius, when this is stuck, it's going to want to fling this out. So there's a lot of pressure on this radius, so I really want to make sure that we have all that glued really well so it doesn't spring off later. So I'm going to go ahead and do at least 3 coats and let it soak in good and give it some good drying time. So that way I don't have to worry about it. Okay, I applied about 3 coats to the face of the plywood and another coat to the face of our pieces. We have all our pieces cut. We're going to let it dry really well because I want maximum strength, because I'm a little worried about that radius, like I said, about it flying forward. But the other good part is I'm putting this on, and then this piece will butt into it, so I figured that would help hold it from springing. But in the meantime, we're gonna let this dry really well, and we'll go take lunch. For some reason that corner didn't stick and it was prying up a little, so I'm gonna reapply some glue and see if I can get it to stick back down. So now what I like to do is take the belt sander and sand it flush on the top, the side we're veneering, and even the bottom, just to make it a nice clean, smooth edge. Then I take a file and file it roughly at a 45 degree, because when you're belt sanding this, it creates a super sharp edge. So if you ever run your fingers on the bottom of the countertop, you don't want to cut your fingers. Now, this is our top, this is our face. What I'm going to do is belt sand this way to take off any high spots on this face. Okay, now we're ready to clean this top up well. We'll apply some glue to the laminate, apply glue to the top, and we'll put this on, router it out. We'll router out our sinks and then file the edge really nice and clean. And then we're ready to put it in. Now, I like to put blue tape on the face of this for 2 reasons. One, it gives me a little protection when I run my router along the edge, just in case the router tips or something. It's just a little more protection, a little more thickness. But then you have to hand file off just a little bit more, but I would rather hand file off a little more than have a notch in the face from the router. The second reason is, when I apply the glue on top of here, it doesn't run down and stick on the face. It's easier to clean off. After you router it, you just pull the tape and then file it off. So we'll go ahead and put some blue tape on. Okay, we'll let this dry a little bit. I had to turn the heat up in here because it was a little colder than it recommended for it to stick. And if you remember on that radius, how it wasn't quite sticking and it popped up, and I had to reapply glue. It's because it wasn't quite warm enough in here, it was kind of tacky. So I turned the heat up, and that should help us with everything adhering properly. So what this is a J roller, and it applies pressure which pushes the contact cement together, which actually activates it and makes it stick better. Okay, so now we'll router it out and then we'll finish pressing it. I'm afraid if you go over the edge a little, when you're pressing with the J-roller, it can crack it. So I'd like to router it out and see where all the edges are and push the edges now down really nice and tight. Okay, before I file it, I just want to show you. And we'll try peeling some of this tape off, see if it comes off as easy as I remember. I haven't built one of these countertops in quite a few years. It's been about 5 or 6 years, so. Okay, now like I said, there's a little more filing to do there than normal, but getting that router bit right next to it really worries me. I'm a chicken, but looks pretty good, I think. So now that I can see where my edges are, I'm going to go ahead and take the J-roller and put pressure everywhere. Okay, now I'll take the hand file and just go all around it and clean everything up. Okay. Turned out pretty nice.